right. Welcome, everybody, to episode number 13. We are at 13 episodes of reacting and watching every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. How are we doing today, guys? This will be a pretty interesting episode, to say the least. If you saw the title, obviously, we'll notice that today's episode, we are talking about trees. And are trees of the same value or more value potentially than human beings? I think the obvious answer to that is yes, they are definitely of higher value. Maybe of some human beings, but no. I am not of that opinion, and I don't think most people are of that opinion, but it will be an interesting discussion because it is something that Dennis Prager of PragerU, who, if you are not familiar with, is proposing to be something that the materialist, the person who does not believe in God, must have to agree with. If you don't have Judeo-Christian values, believing in an ultimate, all-powerful, all-valuable God who's given us his image and thus bestowed onto us his values, then that means we can't be of any superior value to anything else. So it's a very interesting question. Also gets into what do you mean by value and all of that stuff. So it'll be something to get into, something to look forward to. But in the meantime, as we are discussing trees today, I figured it would be interesting to discuss some interesting facts about trees to start out. So here are some interesting facts. You mentioned, I saw in the chat there, Riley, you mentioned the Japanese maple tree. And just so happens the tree that I prefer is also the maple tree. I don't know my specific one, but I think it's crazy. One of the interesting facts about maple trees is there's over 125 species of maple trees. So there are a lot out there, Japanese being one of them. Another interesting fact about maple trees that I found here is that they are very durable. So the wood, the bark of maple trees is very durable, and it's highly prized in woodworking. So a lot of people use it for its aesthetic color and its durability as well. Another cool fact, as bees are going extinct, specifically the honeybee, maple trees are an important source of food for bees, providing pollen and nectar. So just another bonus, having maple trees out there is going to benefit the bees and help them to prosper and survive. And then the last one I have here is the obviously the great nectar that comes from the maple tree is the maple syrup. And so if you are ever wondering about, I just realized I was not showing this screen. If you are ever wondering about, what makes maple trees so special, obviously they produce maple syrup, something that we can put on your pancakes, something you put on your waffles. Very beautiful, very good stuff. So comment below, what is your favorite type of tree? Let me know in the comments below. Riley said that her favorite was the Japanese maple tree. Mean Soak, thanks for commenting. Maple tree, so many maple trees, and you can literally extract syrup out of all of them. So yeah, no, that's a pretty crazy statistic. 126 different maple trees. So comment below, let me know, what are your favorite trees? I mean, evergreens. I also am a huge fan of those redwoods, especially when you go out west in Western Americas, and you see all those giant towering redwoods. You maybe get a group of 10 to 15 people, and you all hold hands to try and hug the just width of the maple tree to see if you can actually get around it. They're just massive. They're so beautiful, so amazing. So comment below, what is your favorite tree? And as we are getting ready into this discussion, let's kind of review, where are we at in terms of watching every single Alex O'Connor video? Well, by myself, I have watched 136 videos. So like I said last time, I'm almost halfway there, because it's about 320 or so, or what is it? 388 videos that he's had out. And so I've watched 136 of those together we have watched 26 videos through these live streams, and we're going to be able to knock off not just one. We're going to be able to knock off more than one tonight. So yes, that's good. It's been just one video the last few weeks, and it's been crazy because they're just so long at this point. But he has a few shorter ones now, so that'll be something to look forward to. We're going to see that number increase some. But yeah, today, as I said before, we're talking about trees. And why? Why are trees so significant to this conversation? Well, it has to do with a video by Dennis Prager. Prager is right here. Dennis Prager. He put out a video discussing how if you don't believe in God, basically, or a Judeo-Christian God, which to me, that makes no sense. Like, there's so many other religions, so many other faiths out there. The fact that you aren't Judeo-Christian, that automatically means that you don't value any species like differently. Like, there's no hierarchy of value, I guess, in that. I think that's kind of a ridiculous claim. That's probably not what he's saying. In the video, he does mention materialism. Basically, if you don't have Judeo-Christian values, you're a materialist, which is not true, but it is the claim that he wants to make. And if he's going to make it, go right ahead. But today will be just an interesting reaction to this video, and we're going to not just be reacting to trees, but we're also going to be reacting to animals in general, because his claim is that if you don't have a Judeo-Christian value system at your core, at your basis, if that's not at the basis of your value system, then that automatically means, supposedly, that humans and any other species are of equal value, because anything that you are made of, the material that you're made of, automatically gives you the value that you have. You have to have some sort of spirit in order to have a higher value, obviously, right? That's the argument he's making. So, yeah, that will be what we will be reacting to. And I say, let's just get started. We have, are you worth more than a tree? Dennis Prager response. Here we go. I got this on mute, so I got to make sure we're good there. All right, here we go.
Compromising energy deserves uncompromising.
While the ads are playing, I might as well do this as well. So, as I mentioned the last few weeks, I'm also doing a bingo card. So right over here, I got the bingo card. If you click in the description, it says, "Let's play bingo." And you click on the bingo card, the link, it'll pull up this right here. And basically, as we go, if there's something that comes up that is like a normal topic or a normal thing to do with Alex O'Connor, something like him bringing up emotivism, or him talking about etymology, him talking about new atheism, nihilism, evolution, right? Any of these things, if they come up, we can check them off as we go. And the cool thing is we got a little free space. So even if you don't get anything tonight, you got the free space at least. So, and if you get it, let me know in the comments. If you're watching this later, you can also let me know in the comments, and I will shout you out in the next video. But yeah, if you're doing it live, it's an extra incentive because I'll get to shout you out live. So that'll be something to look forward to. So make sure to do that. And as we go, I'll be filling out the bingo sheet with you guys. We have not gotten a bingo yet, guys. This is crazy. We have not gotten a single bingo yet. Last week I got 4. So we were literally 1 away from getting a bingo. So, but hopefully this is the week. And if it's you, let me know. So you'll be the first one. If that's the case. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Here we go.
Found a video by the YouTube channel Prager. Hey guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I recently found a video by the YouTube channel Prager University, which you'll likely have heard of, I've responded to them in the past, arguing that if you reject Judeo-Christian values, then you're committed to believing that human beings have the same moral worth as a tree. Okay, perhaps not the best overview, but I'm not exaggerating. And this video is presented by Dennis Prager himself, and was practically begging for a response, and, well, I'm happy to oblige. Prager thinks that if you throw off Judeo-Christian values and support secularism, then you have to devalue the moral worth of humans to the level of other animals, an idea he finds horrifying. This whole video is just absurd, so let's take it from the top.
Are you more valuable than a dog or a cat?
Okay, I want to begin by being absolutely clear. Yes, I think that human beings have more moral worth than non-human animals. I might be wrong about this, but it's what I believe. Many people, Prager included it seems, have a misconception that vegans like myself, or even just secularists, or those who recognize that human beings are just animals, are committed to the belief that human beings have the same moral worth as a dog or a cat or any other animal. This simply isn't true. As a vegan, I think that a pig has enough moral worth not to kill and eat it. But that doesn't mean that I think its life is worth the same as my life, just that its life is not worth the same as my taste buds. But Prager is making a wider point, not just about vegans, but about secularism in general, so we'll see what else he has to say. But first, just listen to this.
Are you more valuable than a dog or a cat, or for that matter, a tree?
Prager is totally caricaturing even veganism and environmentalism, let alone simple secularism. Just because people have begun to care about the environment doesn't mean they think trees are as valuable as human lives. Those who wish to save trees almost invariably do so because they want to prevent harm to the environment. But it only matters if the environment is ruined because creatures like us will suffer, not because the trees will. To respond in the briefest possible terms to Prager's assertion that people are beginning to value all animals the same amount, consider this quote from Peter Singer, the godfather of the modern animal rights movement. Conclude, then, that a rejection of speciesism does not imply that all lives are of equal worth. It just means that they're worth more than we thought before.
One of the biggest differences between Judeo-Christian values and secular values concerns this very issue, the worth of the human being. According to the Judeo-Christian value system, human beings are infinitely valuable.
I suppose that doesn't include those humans whom the Old Testament permits you to take as slaves, or as sex slaves, or those who commit the death-deserving sins of homosexuality or blasphemy. I'm sorry, maybe that was cheap of me.
I just saw your comment, Riley. Where do we get the bingo card? So if you go to the description, so usually the live chat's kind of blocking it. So if you press X on the top right of the live chat, then you'll be able to click on the description. It'll have something kind of like this shown below the video. You'll just press more, and it'll be one of those links. If you have any more trouble, let me know, and I can just show you guys what it's like. So, but yeah, it'll say let's play bingo, and you literally just you click on it that way.
But not as cheap as suggesting that I think that humans have the same moral worth as a tree. So perhaps we're even.
On the other hand, secular humanism devalues the worth of humans.
Okay, there are so many things wrong with this that it's...
So Minsuk says, why is Alex O'Connor woke? What is the purpose behind why he's being vegan? So the reason Alex is vegan is because philosophically he couldn't... he's a philosopher at heart, basically. And philosophically at this point, and even still to today, he couldn't really find an understanding of why he would not be vegan, right? So he uses an example that Peter Singer often uses, which is the idea that if you were to compare like a human being to a dog or a pig, right? Another animal, you kind of go down the criteria checklist of, okay, what exactly makes them different? What thing about them makes them different that I can kill and eat them versus when I apply it to another human being, it would like be the same thing. So like, for instance, intelligence, if a pig is, it's not as smart as us, right? So if a human being is not as smart, does that mean we can automatically, kill it and eat it? I mean, the obvious answer to that is no, right? But he does that with a whole lot of other kind of issues. So like, okay, well, it's smaller. Well, if there's a small human being, does that mean that we can kill and eat the human being? The answer to that is also no, right? If, well, it has, different DNA. Well, when you have someone who is not a family member, they have different DNA. And the further away they are in sort of heredity, that automatically, shows that they have much more diverse DNA. But there's also a lot of shared DNA between us and like a pig or an insect, all those things, right? And so basically the idea is when you keep asking the question, okay, what's actually different? And if that same difference was applied to a human, would that mean it's okay to kill and eat them? The answer to that is always going to be no, right? So that's kind of the philosophical perspective that he's coming with. Riley says, I believe all life is equal. I love that. Yeah. I think there's a ton of value to all life. And there are certain things like maybe viruses. We celebrate the fact, that we eradicate different viruses, which is a form of life, but yeah, I think it gets kind of complicated when we get into the weeds of it all. But at the basis of everything, I would say that veganism probably has a better argument in favor of it than the latter. And I mean, I'm not a vegan, but honestly, after watching all these videos, I've been kind of considering it. So we'll see. Maybe I'll become vegan. It's definitely a big life change. If you guys are vegan, let me know below. I'd love to maybe hear some resources and learn more about it and how I can maybe participate in that. But yeah, basically the notion is similar to like the abortion, argument. What's different about this sort of fetus that makes it so it's okay to, abort, that kind of thing. It's a very similar type of argumentation. No, there's more than that. Like there's environmental reasons, there's environmental benefit to being vegan than not being vegan. There's a whole lot of arguments that Alex portrays really well. So maybe he'll get into those later. But it is definitely something worthwhile. I can't play and watch you at the same time on my phone. Oh, that is a good point. You know what? I never thought about that. I will figure that out for next week. It'll be the same bingo card every week. So Riley, if you're coming back next week, you can also just print it out and fill it out that way. That's probably less convenient. Or sometimes if you're on your phone, you can kind of scroll up. I don't know what phone you have, but you can like scroll up and it'll play it like in a mini view. So maybe you can try that and then also follow along that way. So I didn't think about that. That's a good point. So I apologize about that. But yeah, I'll have the link in there. It's in every single video. So if you want to maybe print it out ahead of time, you can do it that way too, or try minimizing the screen and following along that way. So anyway, yeah. So that's kind of his view, is that veganism philosophically made the most sense for him to make that choice. He has a video actually. He's like, I'm a meat eater. I need you to give me the best arguments in terms of eating meat. Otherwise, I don't have any reason to stay eating meat. I'm going to, switch. So, yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. He doesn't necessarily see animals and other species as superior or equal, but he does see them as valuable and not worth, putting through the pain and torture of like factory farming, killing and eating them. That's kind of what he's arguing in favor for.
It's difficult to know where to begin. Firstly, what on earth are secular values? Secular simply means not connected with religious or spiritual matters. So by secular values, Mr. Prager, do you mean every single value system that isn't religious? I've spoken myself about secular values in the past, by which I simply refer to the ability to have values without religion. But there isn't some single set of values that can be called secular values that's internally consistent. It's a category of values, not some specific set. It would be similar to me describing religious values as though Islamic values, Christian values, and Buddhist values all agree on everything. Of course, there are some things they agree on, so we might use the term religious values when describing these. But to suggest that all secularists devalue humans to have the same moral worth as animals is a total misrepresentation and completely ignores the fact that the vast majority of secular individuals are not vegan or vegetarian, and many don't even care about the environment at all, let alone as much as they value other humans. I mean, just look at the image on the screen. It's being suggested that secular values equate human beings with, what is that, a bird, a fish, a gecko, and a tree? I mean, if you looked up the definition of a straw man fallacy, you wouldn't be misled by having this image as an example. Does Dennis Prager really think that those who hold secular values hold that a human being has as much moral worth as a tree? I can't imagine so, but the picture says otherwise. So presuming he's not intentionally lying, it seems the only explanation is he's arguing this is what a secularist should be committed to believing. So let's hear why.
As ironic as it may sound, the God-based Judeo-Christian value system renders humans infinitely more valuable than any humanistic value system.
This is
Okay, so that makes zero sense. Like, what do you mean by infinitely more valuable? Because, like, what do you mean by infinite, and what's your definition of value? Because humans are... like, humans, in comparison to the value of God in a Judeo-Christian worldview, would be much lesser. So it can't be infinite in terms of value, because if you were infinite in terms of value, that would automatically put you on the same level as of God, right? So then why would you worship God? The answer is, well, God is of more value, and that's why you worship him. And that's why you give honor and glory to him, right? From a Judeo-Christian worldview. So it can't be infinite, because that would put you on the same level as God, because there's no greater infinity. That's not, I don't know, that's kind of nonsense. To me, that's just throwing in a word that sounds pretty.
It's palpably untrue. Of course, a religion like Christianity or Judaism claims to purport that humans are infinitely valuable. But humanists place humans at the very center of their value system, hence the name humanism. And religion doesn't, placing God at the center instead. Now,
that's a very good point, because in faith, basically the notion that the dichotomy that you're given is the fact that when faced with what is morality and what is value, right? What is good, what is bad, it is often going to be because God said so, right? And if it's what God says, then it's subject to God. So you are subject to God. Or if it's some sort of thing that's in nature that God sort of aligns himself with and then says you should follow this part of nature that is the good, right? Well, then you're aligning yourself with what is naturally good and not necessarily with God. And then God himself is under the authority of that sort of morality. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there. There's a lot of vegan foods in grocery stores, in restaurants, more than ever before. I would recommend taking a daily vitamin to make sure you get all the vitamins you need. That's really good advice. Thank you. Yeah. Do you have like maybe a resource that that you'd maybe suggest me look into? But is religion also affiliated with tribalism of feeling belonging to a certain group, sharing the similar moral values? You could say that. I would say religion it's complicated, because that is an aspect of religion. But when you look at ancient religion, a lot of the time what we see is sort of shared values, shared tribalism. So there's often this notion of ancient monotheism. Currently, I'm reading Kip Davis's God's Propaganda, and in the book he talks about ancient monotheism, which really isn't monotheism. the notion that there's this pantheon of gods, but there was a god that maybe started it all, that, you know, all the gods today are offspring of, right? And so it's monotheism in that there's like a beginning god that started it all. You see that in Hinduism. You see that in like all the major religions. The Indo-European religion probably is what started that notion. But anyway, the idea is that this is a shared thing. And so when a new god or a new sort of religion is being seen by one ancient culture to another, it would have been this notion of, oh, that's just one of the other sort of pantheon of gods. And we all kind of recognize that at the core, there's this one God who no longer is acting, no longer really exists in any sort of role. And so we don't really worship him because he's not doing anything, or she. And that's kind of the notion of monotheism that they would have had at the time. Depending on how hardcore you go, you just need to read labels on clothes and food, etc. Okay. Yeah, that's really good. Sweet. I appreciate that, Riley. Thank you. But yeah, I think it's that is a very complicated question though, Meansuk. And I think we can get into the idea that like religion is this basically this sense of tribalism and being a part of a group. But I think it's also more than that. When we see one religion coming against another religion, either there's conflict or there's this sort of like understanding of, oh, they're just uniting under a similar tradition that has different values, but it comes from the same source kind of thing. Not always, but that's also present. And so that's why I would not consider religion tribalism necessarily.
Now, the religious believe that because their God is an infinite being, they have more to offer humans than humanists do. But humanists simply see this as untrue, since they don't believe in an infinite God. They say, we think the religious overestimate the nature of the universe, but we value humans as highly as we think it's possible to value anything, which the religious do not, placing God in this spot instead. In other words, relatively speaking, you could say that humanists value humans more than the religious, since they place mankind at the very center of their value system, whereas the religious don't.
The light that was inside me.
If there is no God, human beings are only material beings.
True.
And therefore not worth anything beyond the matter of which they are composed.
Oh, I'm on mute. So basically here, Alex agrees with a point that I don't think is true. If did he say materialism or naturalism? Hold up.
Simple. If there is no God, human beings are only material beings.
True.
Okay, yeah, that I disagree with. If there's no God, that doesn't automatically mean that humans are material. All it means is that like there can still be a sense of dualism to the world. Bernardo Kasparov is one person I can think of. He thinks that everything is mind, basically. So materialism is not true, but he is a naturalist. So basically the idea is nature is an expression of mindset. So the mind is everywhere, and everything is created of basically the mind. And whenever we see something material, it's a outward expression of the mind. And so in that kind of, it kind of sounds ooh-woo-y kind of perspective, but he is a, respected philosopher of mind. And the notion here is it would explain a lot of like how we get something like consciousness, how we get a lot of these kind of phenomena that don't really follow from materialism. The idea is, well, materialism is not true. Naturalism, so everything in nature is just what is, right? And there is no God. Everything is natural. But what is natural is not necessarily material. It's that materialism is an expression of the mind. And so that would be a form of naturalism, a form of a worldview without God that does not hold to materialism. So I reject that notion entirely. So that's kind of, I think, one thing that I would definitely push against. Another thing that he's gonna bring up later, I'll just play it, but I'll push back on that as well.
And therefore not worth anything beyond the matter of which they are composed.
False. This assertion commits what's called the fallacy of composition. Prager is saying that because matter isn't worth much on its own, things made of matter can't be worth much either. But this would be like saying that since a poem is made of nothing more than words and punctuation arranged in a particular order, any poem is only worth as much as a comma or the letter P is. But a poem is worth much more than that which it's composed of. And so are human beings.
But in the Judeo-Christian system...
Yeah, he nailed that pretty well. That's I've seen the Prager video. I haven't seen Alex's reaction yet, so I didn't know what he was going to say, but I would have said a very similar thing. You can kind of think of it in terms of like a book, right? So I got a book back here. Got a book. I got the Odyssey and the Iliad over here. Actually, Minsuk, you're the one who gave me this book, so thank you for that. Legend. Anyway, you can think of like a book, right? It's made of leather here, and we also have pages in here made of paper and ink, things of that sort. And the notion of I know leather, ironic. So not vegan yet, but we'll probably get there someday. Anyway, the notion here is that everything that is vegan, right, or everything that is material is the substance, right? That's what gives it value. What are you made of, right? This glass cup is made of glass. And so anything that the glass is made of is all the value that it has. But that's not true. Glass on its own is can be made into a whole lot of things. And I would say a cup made of glass is more valuable than just shards of glass laying on the ground, because a cup has water, it gives you function, and it gives you the ability to contain that which is needed, right? Same thing with a book. A book can be made of from a toddler who just kind of scribbles and puts together pages and calls it a book. Or you can have a classic book like this, and you can notice that this is of far more value, far more usefulness, far more utility than any other sort of book. And that's because there's more depth, there's more meaning, there's more purpose to it. And so that's kind of what we mean. And notice there, like, you can bring things more value as you sort of create and combine things together and make things more than what they were materially initially, right? So I would agree. Like, a poem is a great example. A book is a great example. A glass of water is a great example. Like, these are things made of material, and yet when we kind of combine them and form them into more complex things, they take on new meanings. They take on more than what they are materially. So, highly disagree with that.
Human beings are created in the image of God, meaning that human life is sacred.
Right, even if we are made in the image of God, whatever that even means, since nobody seems to be able to provide a precise definition, we'd still be made of matter. The problem Prager mentioned a second ago about us being material beings, as if that even is a problem, would still persist. To avoid this, you have to posit that something exists within us that isn't made of matter and has intrinsic worth of its own accord before it's placed within us. Ah, well, maybe this is what a soul is. But why give a soul to humans and not to a rock or a tree? If humans are truly worth nothing as solely material beings, as Prager is suggesting, it must have been a totally arbitrary choice whether God gave a soul to us humans or gave it to apples or trees or metal ores instead. But if there is some reason to favour giving a soul to a human rather than a rock, that human must have some higher value than the rock before it gets a soul, whilst both are still just material beings. But where can such value come from if material beings are only worth the matter they're made up of? It doesn't add up. Unless, of course, we accept that things can be valuable despite only being material.
In other words, we are either created in the image of carbon atoms and therefore not worth much more than carbon, or we are created in the image of God and therefore infinitely valuable.
No. Just as being created in the image of God doesn't make us gods and doesn't give us the same value and powers as God has, being made of carbon atoms doesn't make us nothing more than carbon, with the same value and powers as an individual carbon atom. Again, a sonata is worth more than the musical notes it's made up of, despite being made of nothing other than musical notes.
I think another thing that's interesting is he mentioned the creator, like God is the one that created humans, and so he, in the creation process, instilled infinite amount of value. What that misses is the fact that God also created animals, right? So how can you say that humans are of infinite value and far more valuable than animals when you're going to also say that God created animals too, you know? So, I mean, the argument is the fact that it was made in the image of God, right? But like Alex said, what does that mean? And if your explanation of being made in the image of God is basically you are made by God and he has instilled in you this sort of thing that is valuable, that is beyond materialism, you have to explain what that is, and then you have to explain how that is more than just the fact that you were made by God. Because if your explanation of being made in the image of God is you were made by God, then you can point to anything and say that was made by God, and so thus it's made in the image of God. So that's not, a very good explanation of this at all.
A person is worth more than the matter he's made of, despite being made of nothing other than matter.
Our secular post-Judeo-Christian society has rendered human beings less significant than at any time in Western history.
I'm sorry, who do you think had more care for the worth of human beings? A modern humanist or a Christian slave trader in the 18th century? To suggest that modern secular societies value human beings less than our ancestors, or even existing religious regimes who wage religious slaughter, divinely inspired invasions and annexations, and justify human slavery, is beyond offensive and based on a total falsehood. Prager is clearly basing his hypothesis that secularists devalue human life on the fact that they care about non-human animals, as we'll see. But this isn't a lowering of the worth of humans, it's a raising of the worth of non-humans. Those of us modern secularists who do count non-human animals as part of our moral community still value humans just as much as we did before. We simply want to afford the same considerations to other animals now too.
First, the secular denial that human beings are created in God's image has led to humans increasingly being equated with animals.
That's probably because human beings are animals, Mr. Prager. I hope this doesn't come as a surprise.
That's why, over the course of 30 years of asking high school and college students if they would first try to save their dog or a stranger, 2/3 have always voted against the person.
Okay, clearly, this is not about whether students value dogs or humans more. It's about their personal relationship with the individual animals. If these students had to choose between saving their beloved dog or their beloved sibling, they'd choose the sibling. The fact that, in the example Prager is presenting, the students love the dog but don't even know who the stranger is, completely distorts the results. No serious researcher would consider this comparison a reliable way to test people's relative value of dogs and humans in general. To illustrate, imagine I asked Mr. Prager a similar question. If your beloved daughter was drowning, and next to her 5 men you've never met were also drowning, who would you save? Most people would probably save their daughter. Aha! This clearly means that they value women more than they value men, because the daughter is female and the strangers are male. Except no, it doesn't, of course. You save the daughter because it's your daughter, not because she's a girl. These students save the dog because it's their dog, not because it's a dog.
They either don't.
That's a good point. My also response would be, what's your source? What is this study? And then look into what the study is, because a lot of the time when you just kind of present statistics, you don't say what the study is, and you don't explain basically all the minutia, the detail behind the study, then there's a lot of things that can get lost in translation. You can take things out of context. You can even just lie. You can just say, well, this is statistic, and maybe it's not. I don't know. So that yeah, the fact that he's not mentioning what his source is, what this study was, where we can go find it, like, that's problematic. Anytime you hear someone say a statistic and they don't mention what the source is, or they don't quote it or whatever, that's a red flag. Mark that as a red flag every time.
Know what they would do, or they actually vote for the dog. And many adults now vote similarly. Why? There are two reasons. One is that with the denial of the authority of higher values, such as religious teachings, people increasingly make moral decisions on the basis of how they feel. And since just about everybody feels more for their dog than for a stranger, many people simply choose the dog.
Yeah, just like how you feel more for your daughter than for 5 strangers. I could say that this means you don't value human life, since saving the strangers would be better for more humans, and so saving your daughter indicates that you don't care about humans. But this would be a completely dishonest way to explain your behavior. And besides, asking people about what they would do in any given situation is totally irrelevant to the question of what they feel they should do.
The other reason...
That's good. Minsoka just mentioned here, this reminds me of aesthetic factors, like it's all right to kill a cockroach while it's wrong to kill a butterfly. Yeah, I mean, that is a preference that a lot of humans kind of share. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we, like you said, aesthetically view a butterfly as beautiful, and we want to protect the butterfly. We want to see it thrive and grow, especially the monarch butterfly, who's also going extinct, is an endangered species. But then on top of that, like cockroaches, we kind of see them as gross, and we kind of are like, ew. And so we're okay with like stepping on them and killing them and eradicating them. So there's definitely a good point there to be made, right? Like we like seals, we like dogs, we like a lot of animals that we find to be cute. They're very cute. But then when it comes to, say, a possum, we don't really find it very cute, and so we don't like them, So that's definitely a thing that we kind of see. Or pigs. Pigs are very smart, and yet we are okay killing and eating them. But then an animal that's pretty well just as smart as a pig, a dog, we would never even think about doing that. We would view that as very wrong. And so that's probably an aesthetic thing. So very good point.
Is that once you get rid of Judeo-Christian values, there's no reason for elevating human worth over that of an animal.
Again, we are animals. You mean elevating human worth over that of other animals. And yes, there is reason to do this. Just as we morally value certain humans over other humans when necessity requires it, we value certain species over other species. Secular values are almost always predicated on experiences of pleasure and pain, which all animals share to varying degrees. It's these degrees that allow us to determine which species we value most. There's one reason for you, Mr. Prager, one reason among many, and it's a simple and popular one. Just don't try to tell me that just because you don't agree with such reasons don't exist. But also, consider this. Prager is basing this argument on the fact that his religion elevates all humans above other animals, morally speaking, and that this means that other animals are worth nothing more than the material they're made out of. Okay, tell me, Mr. Prager, do you value dogs more than you value cockroaches? If so, why? If the only way we can value humans over...
Dude, that's crazy. That's exactly what you were just saying, Meansuk. It's crazy.
...dogs is because humans are made in the image of God, How can we value dogs over other animals, or insects, or even inanimate objects, since dogs aren't made in the image of God and are just as material as these other things? In fact, scratch that. Do you value dogs at all? Do you think they have any moral worth? Presumably you do. I can't imagine you'd be in favor of cruelty against dogs, for instance. But what is this value based on? As I say, dogs aren't made in the image of God, so where does their value come from? Oh, can animals have worth that derives from something other than being made in the image of God, even if they're just material beings? Well, if you're allowed to do that for dogs, Mr. Prager, I'm allowed to do it for humans. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that just comes to mind for someone who holds to these kind of values, and if you are Judeo-Christian, if you hold to those values, you don't have to believe that humans are the only ones who have a soul or anything like that. Like, that's not a notion that you have to hold to. But it seems like that's kind of what he's proposing here, that's what he's suggesting. Maybe that's not. Maybe it's more this idea that humans have a soul that is of God's image, whereas other animals might have like a lesser soul or something. I don't know. But it seems like that's kind of what he's suggesting. And so with that, the question you might follow up with is, well, okay, would you think that a dog who's alive versus a dog who's dead both have the same sort of material? Which one would you value more? Would you value them equally? I mean, the obvious answer is no. You're not going to value them equally. And so then the question is why? Oh, well, they have the same sort of material. So then why do you value one over the other? Well, because we value animals that, feel, things that can suffer, things that can have pleasure. We value those things, and we want those things to thrive and to feel, nourished and to feel safe and secure. And so that's why we would value a dog who's alive versus a dog who's dead. Yes, it's made of the same material, but obviously the material is not what makes it value. It doesn't have the same equal value as the material structure of it. Its value is far beyond that. It's more nuanced than that.
That's why people estranged from Judeo-Christian values, including many Jews and Christians, support programs such as Holocaust on Your Plate.
Okay, listen to the wording here. Many people, he says, agree with this campaign. Which people? How many? What's this support based on? Or are you just throwing this out there, Mr. Prager, in the hope that...
Yes, I love it. What's your source? Who are you talking about? What's the study? All of that. It's great questions.
No one will question it. Look, I've met a great number of secularists who are appalled by the comparison of factory farming to the Holocaust, and I've met a great number who think it's an accurate comparison. Show me your data on how significant these ideas have actually been.
Holocaust on Your Plate is a campaign developed by the animal rights group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, that teaches that there is no difference between the barbecuing of chickens in America and the burning of Jews in the Holocaust.
Oh, come on. Firstly, you know it wasn't just Jews who died in the Holocaust, don't you? I'd expect someone so ostensibly caring and sensitive about this period of history to respect the memory of everyone who died there, not just the Jews. And like we spoke about before, Peter was making a comparison, not an equation. If your moral system is based upon suffering and sentience like mine is, you may well be logically committed to saying that the modern animal industry is worse than the Holocaust. Or maybe you think that's an appalling idea. But whether it is worse or much worse, or better or much better, we can recognize that both are utterly wrong, even if to varying degrees, and that future societies will consider both in the same light. After all, the definition of Holocaust is destruction or slaughter on a mass scale. This is exactly what happens in factory farms. If you don't like this, if you don't like the fact that by definition the word Holocaust can apply to factory farming, maybe you've got a problem with factory farming. Maybe you do value non-human animals after all.
No difference between the barbecuing of chickens in America and the burning of Jews in the Holocaust. Why? Because a human and a chicken are of equal worth.
No, I mean, seriously, no. You don't have to say that humans are worth the same as chickens to be against the abuse of both species. This shouldn't need explaining. Also, look, let's take a look at the actual Holocaust on Your Plate campaign. During the 7 years between 1938 and 1945, 12 million people perished in the Holocaust. The same number of animals is killed every 4 hours for food in the US alone. We can say that a non-human animal is worth less than a human, whilst simultaneously recognizing that the point of this particular campaign is to highlight the sheer number of non-human animals that are suffering on factory farms, and that this is what makes the comparison powerful. Also, note how the campaign reminds people of the...
That was also, I mean, that to me is kind of the craziest thing, is the sheer number, the quantity of just suffering of animals that happens all the time. There's the shrimp, I forget what it's called, but like the notion of like trying to save shrimp, because they're one of the animals that gets killed the most, just in insanely high quantities. Like every day, it's hundreds of millions of shrimp die every single day. And, I mean, you can say that, you know, shrimp are of far less value than a human being. I would probably say that a shrimp is less valuable than a human. But the fact that we are killing hundreds of millions of them every single day, that is kind of shocking. And I don't know exactly how I feel about that right now, but it is something to think about. And yeah, the quantity is insane, and that's just one species. There's several species out there that are dying. I was looking at it last week. The foundation, I can maybe link it below, and you can look at them and choose to donate if you want to. So, but yeah, it's crazy number.
The different reasons for the slaughter. 12 million people died in a world war, whereas 150 million non-human animals are killed every day for nothing more than taste pleasure. Even if we accept that factory farm animals have minimal moral worth and far less than any human, the point to take away from this campaign is that our taste buds have even less.
So too in a notorious Tucson, Arizona case, a woman screamed to firefighters that her 3 babies were in the burning house. Thinking that the woman's children were trapped inside, the firefighters risked their lives to save the woman's 3 cats.
Oh, so some firefighters made a mistake based on a frantic woman whose house was on fire not clearly expressing herself and referring to her pets as babies, as a great many pet owners do. This must be indicative of modern secular societies devaluing human worth. Give me a break.
If you think these 2 examples are either just theoretical, the dog stranger question, or extreme, the Tucson mother of cats, here's an issue that is neither theoretical nor extreme. More and more people believe, as PETA does, that even if it would lead to a cure for cancer or AIDS, it would be wrong to experiment on animals. In fact, many animal rights advocates believe that even to save a human life, it would be wrong to kill a pig to obtain a heart valve.
Again, this is disingenuous. Just like before, we have no numbers to work with, no stats. What evidence do you have that this is a popular view, or even that you've understood the view correctly? I'm a secular person, and I believe that if experimenting on an animal were going to lead to a cure to cancer, that we would be justified in doing so. So, what's your point? I'll tell you my point. Animal testing doesn't lead to such medical breakthroughs. That's why I'm against it. Look, I don't say that it's not worth it because animals are worth the same as humans. I say it's not worth it because animals deserve more than torture for useless experiments. Also, consider the following. Commenting on how most animal testing is totally fruitless, here's Peter Singer again. Either the animal is not like us, in which case there is no reason for performing the experiment, or else the animal is like us, in which case we ought not to perform on the animal an experiment that would be considered outrageous if performed on one of us.
The 20th century showed vividly what happens to human worth when Judeo-Christian values are abandoned. Nazi Germany and the various communist regimes all rejected Judeo-Christian values and ended up slaughtering the largest number of people in human history.
I like how they always point to, you know, the Nazi regime and the Soviet Union as prime examples of secularism, which is not true. They are not secularists. They are they're against secularism. Secularism is like freedom of religion and expression, whereas Nazis and Soviet Union were very much so pro-atheism and anti-God and anti any sort of religion. Not necessarily Nazis. That was part of it, but not the entire thing. But Soviet Union definitely was that was the case, which is by definition not secularist at all. And yeah, it's a very weird argument. But then you can kind of let's look at the Eastern countries, There's no Judeo-Christian values there, at least in the majority of the population. And so are we going to say that everything they did was wrong and evil and torturous? No, like that they have beautiful traditions that have been passed down from generation to generation. Yes, and North Korea. North Korea is a another example of poorly done, just totalitarian sort of governance. But we can look at other cultures outside of the Judeo-Christian sphere, cultures that predated, Judaism, and we can see that there is a sense of goodness there. It's hard to look at it entirely, but even within Judeo-Christian values, there's things that we would say are not humanist or not valuing humans. So I don't know. These kind of arguments are very, they're anecdotal. They sort of point to one thing and then ignore all of the counterfacts. They use one scenario or one example, and they say, this is an example of all secularism. This is an example of everything outside of the Judeo-Christian value system. And you just ignore the fact that, there's a ton of other values out there that exist and have a lot of value and have brought a lot of value to people. And you're just kind of ignoring it just to make your case. That's the thing that annoys me, I think, the most.
Oh, please. How many times are we going to have to hear that communism proves how evil secularism is? Firstly, the USSR was not secular. Like I said before, secular means not connected with religious or spiritual matters. Enforcing atheism and murdering religious officials, which the communists did, is definitely an involvement in religious and spiritual matters. Point 2, communism, at least the kind referred to by Prager, may indeed necessitate atheism, but atheism doesn't necessitate communism, and even if it did, an atheist state is not a secular state, and Prager is arguing that it's secular values that are to blame for this disregard of human life that he seems to be observing. Point 3, Nazism has a close connection to Christianity and specifically Roman Catholicism. Hitler was quite possibly lying when he called himself a Roman Catholic. We'll never know for sure, but those men who were actually doing his killing for him, holding guns on the front lines and outside of torture chambers, were Christians. How about I cut you a deal, Mr. Prager? I won't use this logic to suggest that Christianity is responsible for Nazism if you stop using it to suggest that secularism, which you've confused for atheism anyway, is responsible for communism.
For Nazism, Jews and members of other non-Aryan groups were declared worthless and murdered in the millions. For communists, human worth was determined solely by communist parties which murdered tens of millions of people. Only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values could Nazis declare Jews, Slavs, and others subhuman. And only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values could communist regimes slaughter those they called class enemies. Individual human life meant nothing.
Really? I mean, really? Only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values can a regime be anti-Semitic or adopt another form of racism or class oppression. Just let the absurdity of that suggestion and the historical examples of religious anti-Semitism and other bigotry ring between your ears for a moment. Again, I'll remind you that even if Hitler was secretly an atheist, he used Christian values to support his ideals. He didn't abandon them. They were one of the very things that helped him sell his ideology. But look, don't take my word for it. Take Hitler's, who said in Volume 1, Chapter 2 of Mein Kampf that he believed he was acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator.
Meanwhile, human slavery was abolished only in the Judeo-Christian world.
Well, fantastic. I'm so glad that slavery was abolished in societies that believed in a religion that was once used to justify the very slave trade being abolished, once they began to move past biblical literalism and enter an age of secular enlightenment. It was high time they made up for this moral disgrace.
And of course, for nearly all those who reject Judeo-Christian values, the human fetus is worthless, if its mother deems it so.
Well, this is obviously a totally disconnected issue. There are secularists who are pro-life and secularists who are pro-choice. And oftentimes, those who are pro-choice don't devalue the life of a fetus. They simply don't believe that it is a life, at least not yet. And maybe they're wrong about that. That's a separate debate. But to say that they're motivated to their views by a devaluing of human worth is disingenuous at best.
Finally, there is an increasingly vocal part of the environmentalist movement that also denigrates human worth. For these individuals, the human being is not infinitely precious. Trees and rivers and mountains are.
Such people still value humans, even if they value the environment too. Again, this is a raising of the worth of the environment, not a lowering of the worth of humans. Also, remember how you said earlier that if things are only material, then they can't have infinite value. If these tree people are materialists, as you were suggesting earlier, then since both trees and human beings are material things, they can't think the environment is infinitely valuable, as you say, since they're made of the same mere matter as human beings. So you're either right about their materialism, in which case you're wrong about how much they care for the environment, or you're right about how much they care for the environment and wrong about them being materialists. Make your mind up. Or don't. I really don't care. Just don't make another video until you've done so, if only for the sake of the bags under my eyes.
So, are you more valuable than a dog or a cat or a tree? That depends on your value system. I'm Dennis Prager.
Wow, hot take. How you value things, get this, depends on your value system. Thanks to Dennis Prager, as always, for charitably imparting his unparalleled wisdom to us delusional secularists. And thanks as always to you, of course, dear viewer, for sticking with me through this shambles. If you want to help me keep it up, then you can consider supporting me on Patreon, where I've begun doing private live streams and I keep up communication with supporters of the channel. Or you can share my videos with your friends, which is equally appreciated and helpful. To those who are already supporting the channel in either of these ways, you have my eternal gratitude, or at least as eternal as it can be from an atheist.
Infinite.
I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. You can find me on social media here. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, that was an interesting one. I mean, it clearly wasn't the best argumentation in the world, but I think it makes sense what he's trying to get at, which is he's against the notion that humans are being valued less and non-human animals are being valued more. He wants there to be a greater sort of separation. Now, I think you can make the argument that that kind of separation is what has led to things like slavery throughout all of time. It's led to things like racism, classism, all the sort of isms that separate us rather than the things that unite and bring us together. So, I think it's just kind of a wild thing to say, but I get it if that's, your prerogative, but yeah. Anyway, it is time to leave a comment on that first video discussing, are humans of more value than an animal or a tree? And as always, let me know in the comments below if anything stuck out to you and you would like to mention that in the comment. Let me know and I will do that. Prager, are you more valuable than a dog? Me. Checks bank account. No. Yikes. The more I learn about people, the more I like my dog. Mark Twain. Oh, that's cool. I just looked outside and there it was, a tree I value higher than Dennis Prager. Dang, these are savage. Oh my goodness. If I hear Judeo-Christian values from the man's mouth one more time, I think I will actually go brain dead. Wow. Is there any positive comments here? Oh, hey, if there are no dogs in heaven, I want to go where they went. William Rogers, my bad. Are you worth more than a dog? Not to the dog. Ooh, that's interesting. I think Prager values his straw man as the highest form of moral worth. How can Prager be wrong? He has these amazing animations and sound effects. He has to be right. I will say the animations and the sound effects, they were pretty nice. I did enjoy those. They were pretty high quality if I do say so myself. So that's the kind of stuff that I enjoy putting together. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's pretty obvious where he's kind of going wrong. In that the whole notion that if materialism is true, then everything you are made of is what your value is, just doesn't really make sense. I think we can clearly see that in the, like I said, the analogy with the cup, or the analogy of the book. A lot of things, they're more valuable than what they're made of. What they're made of is what they're made of, and then there's the function, utility, the purpose that it brings to other conscious beings. All of those things kind of apply. So, yeah. I will lead the comment real quick, and then we'll move on to the next video. Okay. I said, hey, Alex, this is Jackson from the Truth and Tradition podcast. I am on a mission to watch every one of your videos and leave a comment on each of them. I think the poem analogy you gave was excellent. As he mentioned, the idea that if materialism is true, then everything is worth as much as the parts that make it up. I think that is ridiculous. There we go. Another question I would ask him is if he values a living human over a non-living human. If they have the same material, and yet one we are okay to bury in the ground or to burn, while the other we are against that. Clearly, value is more than the parts that make up something. Cool. Yeah, if there's anything else that maybe stuck out in the video, let me know and I can add it. But I will leave that comment for now, and we'll move on to the next one. I haven't looked into what this other video is, but it has something to do with some more protests that were going on. So we'll check that out. Here we are. Arrested for offending Islam. Here we go.
A few days ago, I was in London attending an event consisting mostly of ex-Muslims discussing ex-Muslim and atheist issues. And one of the issues that was brought to my attention was the case of Sohail Arabi. Sohail Arabi is a man like me. He's a blogger and created content criticizing Islamic governance and just Islam as a religion in general. But the difference between us is that whilst I live in the UK in relative safety, Sohail Arabi lives in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Now, if you know the slightest thing about that backward joke of a regime, you won't be at all surprised to learn that in 2013, he was sentenced to be executed by the government of Iran for insulting the country and the prophet of the religion that it's founded upon. I'll repeat this. Sohail was sentenced to death for the crime of insulting a dead man on social media. The Iranian regime forced his wife to divorce him, and he hasn't seen his child in years. The good news is this. Thanks to the efforts of human rights organizations and protesters, Sohail's sentence was reduced to mere imprisonment and the compulsory study of Islam. The bad news is this. A man is still in prison for expressing his opinion on social media, and his punishment includes a forced study of a religious tradition. And Sohail has been beaten and tortured to the point of hospitalization by prison guards. Conditions in the prison are so bad that Sohail has repeatedly gone on hunger strike to protest not only his own mistreatment, but the mistreatment of his fellow inmates. And whilst Sohail has been doing so much for the cause of free expression and for the well-being of his fellow inmates, most of us here in free democracies have done precisely nothing for him in return. That's a scandal, and we should be ashamed of our inaction and our failure to respond to this moral emergency. Luckily, this isn't true of everyone. The day after the event in London, I joined my friend Armin Navabi, as well as fellow speakers such as Steve Woodford and Drew McCoy and the conference organizers, and a number of conference attendees as well, in protesting right outside of the embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran for the release of Sohail Arabi. We were met with a police response and told that we couldn't protest directly outside of the embassy. Luckily, we know our rights and were not intimidated into retreating from the embassy door. A police officer actually attempted to get Armin's name and phone number whilst completely obscuring the fact that this isn't a legal necessity. Here's the rather amusing footage of that interaction.
My response was no.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep asking you to move to the side of the street, okay?
And I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
Well, then we're not working together, then, are we?
No, we're not.
But why is that? Why aren't you cooperating?
Because it's not illegal. It's not illegal. Our limit is the law.
Right, okay. But like
Our
I say,
limit is the law.
yeah, I appreciate that. But like I say, it would facilitate us to work together if you could go to the other
But it
side of the
wouldn't
street.
facilitate us. Is it the law that I have to give up my name?
I'm not sure. If you're just stood in public, I don't think you have to give your name if you're just...
Can you tell me if it's the law that I have to answer your
No,
question?
as long as you're not. What?
Is it the law that if you ask me a question, I have to answer?
I'm asking for your details so that
No,
I can.
you hear my question.
I'm hearing your question.
My question was, is it the law that when you ask me a question, I
Yeah.
have to answer?
And I'm asking for your name and address.
No, are you listening to my question?
I am. I'm asking for your name and address.
I know what you're asking, but
You're not
you...
being cooperative. That's fine. I would just be to control and say you're not being cooperative.
Go ahead. But
Okay.
can you answer my question?
Yeah?
Is it the law that when you ask a question of me, I have to answer it?
Well, yes. Well, yes.
Definitely not. I don't know UK law, but I mean, not in the US. You can plead the fifth. That's definitely a thing. You don't have to stop to answer questions if you don't, and there's no other reason to suspect you then this alone can't be used as reason to search or arrest you.
Well, yes, when I'm asking you, what is your purpose here?
To protest for the imprisonment and
Okay.
torture of Sohail Arabi.
Why can you not just give me your contact details and we can carry on with this? Because I've got loads of other things to be
Do I
doing.
have to?
I would prefer it, to be fair.
Okay, I don't prefer it.
Okay, all right.
You know, actually, look, who's blocking the door?
We work
You
here.
guys are
Yeah, we work there.
We're working as well.
No, you're not working there, are you?
What?
You're
This
not
is our
working.
job. Activism is our job.
Oh, full-time job? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, then. Arrange this interview.
So you do your job, we'll do ours.
Thank you so much.
On the other side of the road, I spent a few minutes speaking to Armin about Sohail Arabi and his condition and our protest outside of the embassy. This was filmed by Steve Woodford. The thing that strikes me is not how bad he's got it, but how good we've got it. We don't even think about the fact that we can say whatever we want and get away with it. Like you were just talking to the police, and you were basically sticking it to them, and they can't do anything.
Right.
Like they were saying, you know, you're not going to stand here, and you said, yes, we are, and that was the end of it.
Right.
We live in a country where you can do that kind of thing. These people live in a country where you can't even make a Facebook post without getting arrested and sentenced to death. That's what a lot of people I don't realize about this that I've been telling about it. Yeah, he's arrested now, but he was originally sentenced to death.
Right.
And that only gets retracted when human rights.
Armin Navabi is the person that he had on his first podcast too. And the interesting thing about this guy here, Armin, is that he too is sort of a victim of Islam to a certain degree. Not on the same level, but he's a victim in that he attempted suicide when he was a teenager because of the teachings of Islam. He didn't really see any purpose in trying to live past the age of 13. I think it was 13, 14, something around there, because that's kind of the age of accountability. And then by that point, you then are accountable for your actions, right and wrong actions, and they will count against you whether you go to heaven or hell, basically. And so he wanted to commit suicide prior to that because he was like, well, I don't want to be accountable for that. I don't want to go to hell, so I'm going to do this as a way of escaping hell and getting to heaven. And obviously that's very traumatic and it leads to a lot of issues. And so yeah, he in a sense he's a victim of Islam, and obviously there's more than that. There's a lot of trauma from his growing up years, and that's why he's open to just speaking out and open to critiquing it. So that's kind of a bit of background with him. His job is to speak against Islam and to kind of expose some of the darker sides behind the Quran and the teachings of Islam. So yeah, no, it's definitely admirable to kind of see him to do that.
Organizations kick up a big fuss about it.
Actually, that's a very good point, because to the people that say that these kind of things don't have any effect, the only reason why they remove the death sentence is exactly because of stuff like this. But then now people started ignoring him, and they started torturing him.
There are people in London today and this year and in the summertime who are knocking down Parliament's door and saying, do something about the climate, do something about animal suffering.
Right.
We should be going to the embassies of these countries, knocking down their door and doing exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
And like you said, if this was a Muslim who was being persecuted, there'd be more people here.
Yeah.
And more of them with cameras.
Yeah.
And more of them from newspapers.
Yeah, as they should.
As they should.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Like that's a good thing that
Yeah.
they're there doing that, but they should be here as well.
Yeah.
And they're just simply not.
Because nobody gives a f*** about atheists, including other atheists.
This wasn't the only protest. There were many protests just like it happening all over the world, and there will be more, and more, and more, until Sohail Arabi is afforded the justice that he deserves. I hope to see you at a future protest. I hope I don't need to stress any further that this whole situation is a stain upon human rights and deserves our immediate attention. This may appear only to be one man's struggle, but Sohail Arabi's case is a symbolic one, indicative of Iran's refusal to respect the basic human rights of its citizens. That's why Steve Woodford, Rationality Rules, and I are starting a petition for the UK government to condemn Iran's treatment of Sohail Arabi and express solidarity with both him and his right to free expression. So if you live in the UK, we urge you to sign this petition. If we can surpass 10,000 digital signatures, the UK government is obligated to respond to our request. What better way to demonstrate our support for Sohail Arabi than to make our government acknowledge and denounce his arrest and conditions. If you don't live in the UK, there is another petition on the website for Atheist Republic, which aims also to just raise awareness of Sohail's condition. Both links are in the description. Please help us reach our government as a first step in the process of eventually reaching Iran's. If you've seen my videos before, then consider this. If I were to make precisely the same videos that I already do, but just so happen to live in another country, in Iran, I'd have been arrested too. It shouldn't escape us that we've won a kind of lottery by being born into a free country that allows us to protest inhumanity, and should recognize that it's a moral offense not to do so. Please sign our petition, not just for the rights of Sohail Arabi, but for the rights of everyone like him. When this same Islamic Republic once condemned Salman Rushdie to death for the crime of writing a novel, forcing him to live in hiding, his friend Christopher Hitchens said the following of Salman's circumstance: Mutato nomine et date fabula narrator. Change only the name, and this story is about you.
Wow, that's cool. Sohail Arabi. Here's his biography. Sohail Arabi is an Iranian blogger born in 1985. He was arrested in 2013 for criticizing Islam and Islamic Republic governing methods and was sentenced to the death penalty. In 2013, Sohail and his wife were arrested by Iranian terrorist Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. After a few hours, his wife was released, and within several months, she was forced by Iran's regime to divorce Sohail. That's crazy. Wow. A forced divorce. But Sohail was tortured and kept in solitary confinement for 2 months and then transferred to Evin prison. State-owned mass media in Iran accused Sohail to violation, but Sahwan News, I don't know that. If you know how to pronounce that, let me know. Website published its court ruling for the first time, which shows that Sohail is sentenced to death for insulting Prophet Muhammad and Iran's supreme leader and 2 other officials, Golham Ali Haddad Adel and Ahmed Janati. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but wow. The first case against Sohail, insulting the sanctities of Islam, publishing photos and images and contrary materials to public opinion, propaganda against the regime, insulting the supreme leader Khamenei, insulting government officials. Initially, he was sentenced to death because of blasphemy against the Prophet Muhammad, but his sentence was revised to 7 years and 6 months of prison and 30 lashes. 30 lashes? Oh my goodness. In appeal court on the condition of his education and researches in Islam. Wow. What? 30 lashes is insane. That's basically like Jesus, getting flogged prior to crucifixion. That's insane. Oh my goodness. Wow. So that's Sohail. It's cool. All right. Well, we will leave a comment now. Let me comment the little prep here. We are now at 138 videos for the last 2. And together we have watched 28. So good job, everyone. So what should we comment? What kind of stuck out to you guys? I think the main thing that kind of stuck out to me is just the boldness of Alex. Also just the cool, just the recognition of privilege, I guess, when you are in a nation like here in the US or in the UK or a lot of these sort of nations here where we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. We are blessed because we get to express ourselves and we get to challenge ideas. We get to disagree with each other publicly and not be under the pressure of having to die or be imprisoned or shut down for what we're saying because that is something that our government has chosen to protect. And so that's kind of a really cool thing to see. And hopefully we can kind of fight for that for their nations. So, Yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing. But if there's something else that stuck out to you, let me know. I forget what his name was. Armin, that's it. Cool. Comment made. All right. We will do the next video. We got time for, I think, maybe one or two more, depending on how long these are. There's a lot of long ones at this point, so I'm trying to find some that are a little bit shorter so we can kind of knock some more off together. Let's see. So we did this one. He's got his talk with Earthling Ed. He's got a short kind of clip from that. But I'm thinking, do human rights actually exist? That seems like an interesting question. And animal liberation, that's another one. The trial of Galileo, what really happened? All right, I'm going to put it up to vote. What video do you want to listen to next? Do human rights actually exist? So let's hold up. Okay. Put up a poll. So which video next? Do human rights actually exist? Why it's time to go vegan. So animal liberation. And then the trial of Galileo. That's definitely an interesting one. We'll do one more. And then atheists can't justify caring about animals. All right. Which one? I'll just say atheists not caring for animals because it won't let me put the whole title in. It's too long. But But that's this video here. Atheists can't justify caring for animals, so you can kind of know what that is. All right, poll is out. What video should we do next? Poll is out. Go ahead and vote. Which one do you want to do next? I think I'm interested in the Galileo one, but I'd also be interested in the human rights one. The animal liberation is kind of on topic with what we've been talking about, so maybe if you want to hear more of that, we can hear his talk on that. But yeah, let me know. What should we react to next? And while you guys are voting, I will discuss a bit more of the bingo card here. So did we get any more from that last video? Psychedelics, no. New atheism, no. PNQ, no. A violent philosophical analogy, no. Thomas Aquinas, no. Nihilism, no. Evolution, no. Problem of evil, Richard Dawkins. Oh, Islam. There we go. If you have Islam on your bingo card, you can knock that one out. Okay, so what are we looking for? We need triangle in the brain. We're probably not going to get that one. P then Q. Etymology. He brings that up fairly often. Free will, and then ChatGPT. Dang. Probably not any of those. Quantum physics. Violent. I mean, this is a very likely one. That's also fairly likely. And then quotes from a philosopher. I mean, we're definitely going to get it there. So if you want to fill out your bingo card, maybe you can vote in favor of that as well. But I'm thinking we'll probably get the quotes from philosopher from one of them. Maybe we'll get a violent analogy, philosophical analogy. And then quantum physics, it's always a possibility. So, but yeah, if you have something on your bingo card that you're like, oh, maybe it'll get that, you can vote in favor of that as well. I would be voting in favor of this one, though, because it seems like what will get the most out of it. So we'll see. I would probably vote, in favor of the trial of Galileo. That's an interesting story, the trial of Galileo. I remember learning a bit about that a few years back. He faced a lot of persecution, basically mentioning that the world, proposing the idea that heliocentrism is not true, that the world does go around the sun. The earth revolves around the sun rather than everything sort of revolving around the earth. It's kind of a crazy notion back then, especially if you are biblical literate. That does seem to go against a lot of the Bible. The Bible's not a scientific book, so you don't have to be literal in that sense, but it is something to consider. So go ahead and vote. Which one? Do human rights actually exist? The other one is why it's time to become a vegan. The third one is the trial of Galileo. And the last one, potential option, is atheists can't justify caring about animals. I think it's kind of a ridiculous notion to kind of mention that. So go ahead and share your vote. My vote would definitely be on this one here. But if you want to hear more about what was on topic, the animal liberation seems fairly good. If you're unfamiliar with the series, if you're just watching, tuning in, you're like, what are we doing here? I am on a mission to watch every single Alex O'Connor video on the internet. And so every Thursday night, I've been streaming, doing this. And so far, we have watched 138 videos. And together, we've watched 28. So we're probably going to watch one more. So it'd be 29, which means next week we're going to hit up to 30. So it's going to be really cool. This week, we watched this video earlier on. So if you want to tune in, you can kind of watch that. It was, Are You Worth More Than a Tree? Discussing that with Dennis Prager's video talking about, are humans of more value than animals? And the notion is that if you are supposedly a materialist, then humans are of no more value than the carbon atoms that make them up, which is ridiculous. Obviously, we are of higher value. You can think of a book, you can think of like I said earlier, a glass of water. Shards of glass on the ground are of less value than a cup made of glass. They're made of the same material, and yet the cup is of more value. Why? Because the cup brings about more utility. It brings about more use for conscious beings. Something with like a poem. You know, you can have a toddler scribble on a piece of paper, and that's going to be of less value than the poem that someone writes. Why? Because a poem has more value for conscious beings. It's not the material that makes it value. It's not. It doesn't stop at the material level. It is the utility, the use, the expression, the impact that something has. All of those things contribute to something's value. So it's not just the stuff that makes it up. There's so much more to it than that. So I think hopefully that's pretty clear. But yeah, go ahead and vote. We have 3 videos to vote on. Whether it is next, we're going to watch. What is it? It is, do humans' rights exist? The other option is why it's time to become a vegan. Third option is a discussion on the trial of Galileo. So if you want to learn about the trial of Galileo. And the fourth option is atheists can't justify caring about animals. I think I'll give you guys another minute and then we'll discuss. So you got 1 more minute. 1 more minute to vote. 1 more minute to vote. 1 more minute to boot. Yeah, Galileo would be a pretty interesting one, for sure. Because his kind of experience is very similar to kind of what we saw with the last video with Sahil. He too kind of faced imprisonment. He faced persecution just because he valued objective scientific method and truth, and didn't see a ancient textbook as being of more significance and value and more truth giving than, scientific inquiry. So he, didn't see that as necessarily conflicting. He didn't see it as conflicting things, but the Catholic Church definitely did. So if you want to hear about his story, you can vote on that one. All right, I'm going to end the poll. It looks like the trial of Galileo is what won the vote. So we will do that one next. The trial of Galileo. What really happened? Here we go.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
Hey guys, it's Cosmic Skeptic, and I asked my supporters on Patreon what content they'd like to see on the channel, and they voted for a video on the trial of Galileo. If you like what I do, by the way, please do consider becoming a patron. Even $1 per month can go a really long way. Or if you prefer to get something in return for your support of the channel, we're also now selling Cosmic Skeptic Christmas jumpers just in time for the holidays, if you want to engage in the festivities without the Christmas or religious imagery all over your clothing. Now, as you may already know, I'm currently reading for a degree in philosophy and theology, and as part of a science and religion module for the theology part, I had to spend some considerable time last term reading the works and personal correspondence of Galileo Galilei in order to find out what his trial and sentence at the hands of the Catholics can tell us about the relationship between the Church and the scientific method. Galileo's story is one of the most misrepresented in the history of science and religion, so I just wanted to make a video like this, clearing some things up. So firstly, if you think that Galileo dared to suggest that the Earth orbits the Sun, not the other way around, and was tortured and killed by the Catholic Church for his audacity in doing such a thing, you'd be wrong. Galileo was never tortured, nor was he put to death, and stories of his persecution have historically been greatly exaggerated.
Wow.
However, Galileo was legally condemned by the Church for trying to write about the heliocentric model, and not only this, but in such a way that may have involved some fraud on the part of the Catholic authorities. There's a lot to unpack here, but I want to be comprehensive, so strap yourselves in and use the time codes in the pinned comment if you want to skip to any particular section. Part 1. Context. The first thing to understand about the trial of Galileo is the context in which it occurred. Galileo lived in the 16th and 17th centuries, meaning that he was born right after the Protestant Revolution, in which the Catholic Church, of course, experienced an unprecedented challenge to its authority, and as well as this, a loss of followers. In response to the Protestant Revolution, the Church called the Council of Trent, an ecumenical council wherein church authorities all came together in order to clarify the position of the Catholics and to denounce the heresies of Protestantism. Most relevant to our present discussion is that in Session 4 of the Council of Trent, the Catholics explicitly limited the interpretation of the Bible to bishops and councils of the Church, meaning that only they could decide what the Bible really meant and how to interpret its messages. If anybody else, such as, I don't know, an individual Italian scientist, for example, attempted to reinterpret Scripture, they would therefore be breaking this rule established by the Council of Trent. They did this, of course, because the entire Protestant Revolution was kick-started by precisely that, an individual man reinterpreting Scripture and arguing that the official Catholic interpretation was wrong. Now here's where the trouble starts.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. Yeah, I mean, with a lot of stories, there's going to be exaggeration. And so the notion that he was, on death row or being, deeply put in prison is an exaggeration of the story. So that's pretty cool. Pretty interesting to hear.
Starts brewing. See, Galileo championed a heliocentric model of the solar system, previously advanced by Copernicus, holding that the Earth moves orbiting around the Sun, which is at the center of the system. Helio referring to sun, giving us heliocentrism. But the official understanding of the Church at the time was that the Earth is at the center of the universe instead, and doesn't move at all. So, did Galileo reject Holy Scripture? Well, no, he didn't. One thing Galileo consistently argued throughout his writing is that God's word is always correct and trustworthy. But he also argued that, being inerrant, Scripture cannot contradict what is true in nature. Both must be true. So, putting this together, since Galileo believed that the Earth orbits the Sun, and that our interpretation of Scripture must therefore reflect this, but the Church's official interpretation of Scripture is that the Earth doesn't orbit the Sun.
Are you struggling in your calculus class? Do you have a hard time understanding your instructor? Do you wish...
This essentially equates to Galileo reinterpreting Scripture and saying that the Church's interpretation is wrong. But as I mentioned before, the Council of Trent had forbidden any individual from doing this kind of scriptural reinterpretation. So Galileo had broken the rules. Part 2. Galileo's justification. Galileo's defense of his right to reinterpret Scripture based on his observations and heliocentrism is comprehensively covered in a letter that he wrote to the Grand Duchess Christina of Tuscany in 1615. Throughout this letter, Galileo repeatedly defends the compatibility of religion and science and doesn't criticize Scripture in any way, but he bravely holds to the idea that if science tells us something is true about the natural world, it is completely unreasonable for the Church to expect the scientist to ignore what they've discovered and blindly trust the approved interpretation of Scripture instead. Galileo argues continually that Scripture cannot be false, and we would be foolish to attempt to disprove it, but also argues that nature cannot be false either. And so if our observations of nature contradict our interpretation of Scripture, our interpretation must be wrong. Here's a quote from his letter, so you can have it in his own words. "It is necessary for the Bible, in order to be accommodated to the understanding of every man, to speak many things which may appear to differ from the absolute truth so far as the bare meaning of the words is concerned." This is Galileo saying that sometimes, to help our understanding, the Bible doesn't speak literally, but instead employs metaphors and analogies. Galileo continues, "But nature, on the other hand, is inexorable and immutable. She never transgresses the laws imposed upon her, or cares a whit whether her abstruse reasons and methods of operations are understandable to men." The implication of this, of course, is that whilst the Bible may often be speaking in terms that aren't literally true, and so can feasibly be reinterpreted, nature never uses metaphors. And so when the two contradict, we know which one we must have misunderstood. And Galileo writes that there is no way a scientist, in the face of evidence that seems to clearly contradict the Bible, could simply dismiss the evidence for that reason. Here it is again in his own words. Again, to command that the very professors of astronomy themselves see to the refutation of their own observations and proofs as mere fallacies and sophisms is to enjoin something that lies beyond any possibility of accomplishment. For this would amount to commanding that they must not see what they see, and must not understand what they know, and that in searching, they must find the opposite of what they actually encounter. We simply can't expect someone not to reinterpret Scripture if the current interpretation says that the Earth is at the center of the solar system and we discover evidence to the contrary. But this is the heresy that Galileo committed, daring to suggest that we should rethink our understanding of the world. Part 3. Galileo's warning. In 1616, Pope Paul V, in an official decree, formally declared heliocentrism as heretical due to it being, quote, false and completely contrary to the divine scriptures. Copernicus's book on heliocentrism was subsequently banned until corrections were made to it, such as the removal of suggestions that the Earth moves, again because this contradicted the Church's understanding of Scripture. Here we need to introduce a new person into the story. Cardinal Robert Bellarmine was one of the most important counter-revolutionary figures in the Catholic Church in the time of Galileo, and in 1616, a year after Galileo's letter to the Grand Duchess Christina, and just 1 month before the official decree we just mentioned was issued by the Church, was the man chosen by the Pope to go and speak to Galileo about the heliocentric views that Galileo had been defending. Bellarmine was sent to inform Galileo about the forthcoming decree, which would officially label Galileo's views as heretical. And what happened at this meeting, specifically what Cardinal Bellarmine told Galileo, is the most crucial element of the entire Galileo affair, but is also shrouded in mystery and controversy. The Catholic Church contends that during their meeting, Bellarmine ordered Galileo on the authority of the Church not to write or teach about heliocentrism in any way, shape or form. But as we'll see, that might well not have been what was actually said. What we do know for certain is that Cardinal Bellarmine, visiting Galileo, told him on behalf of the Church that heliocentrism is incorrect and, philosophically speaking, quote, cannot be defended or held. The reason these words spoken to Galileo are of such vital importance is that the contents of this meeting between Cardinal Bellarmine and Galileo were the basis for Galileo's later trial and sentencing. The charges brought against Galileo in his trial were based on the orders that Cardinal Bellarmine supposedly delivered to Galileo in this meeting. But as we'll see, the Church might have gotten what the Cardinal actually said wrong, or maybe even purposefully misrepresented what he said to Galileo in order to silence the scientist.
We'll get to that in just a second, but something that I was just looking into, basically what is the Council of Trent that he mentioned earlier and some of the things that they were mentioning. So it looks like they, like he said, it was mostly this counter to the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation. But some of the things that they were sort of defending were things like the seven sacraments, the doctrine of transubstantiation, so the idea that, in the Eucharist, the bread actually becomes the body of Jesus and the blood actually becomes the blood of Jesus. The idea that salvation is through both faith and works. So in the Protestant Reformation, it's by faith through grace alone. Catholics upheld the idea that no, you need grace, but you also need works. It's both and in order to do it. And with that comes the notion of purgatory, which is another thing that was upheld. The idea that, not everyone's going to have enough works in order to make it to heaven, but as long as they have faith, they will go to purgatory, and then purgatory will refine them so that they will be ready for heaven. And then the upheld the idea of venerating relics and saints. It's very similar to kind of my discussion earlier in a different video discussing the Shroud of Turin and how that was considered to be, sometimes it was considered to be a relic that you can venerate. Other times it was considered to be a relic that you could not venerate. Initially, it was considered by the the Catholic Church that it was not an authentic relic. You can still go and kind of see it as a representation, but the idea of venerating it was condemned. It was not something to be venerated, but it was something just to be seen as a representation of the real authentic thing. But later, as time passed, the notion of it being a fake went out of condition, and the idea of it being venerated was then passed on, and a lot more people venerated it, basically saw it as a legitimate thing, and was able to display it and see it as something that is reverent and beautiful. So these were all doctrines that were in opposition to the Reformation, the Counter-Reformation. That's what the Council of Trent is about. And with that comes the notion that heliocentrism is heretical.
Galileo against writing about heliocentrism happened in 1616, which was some time before Galileo's trial. Fast forwarding 7 years, in 1623, one of Galileo's personal acquaintances was elected as Pope Urban VIII, and so Galileo went to visit his friend, the new Pope, in Rome. And it's said that when he did, the Pope loosened the Church's censure of heliocentrism, suggesting that Galileo may have permission to write about it, in fact, provided he did so in a hypothetical manner. It's worth bearing in mind, however, that the Pope was unaware of the orders that Cardinal Bellarmine had supposedly delivered to Galileo back in
the orders.
in 1616. So now we move to 1632, which is the year in which Galileo published his book, his dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. It's this book that kick-started his eventual trial. These two systems he mentions in the book's title are the Ptolemaic geocentric view, with the Earth at the center of the system, and the Copernican heliocentric view, with the Sun at the center. Now, in accordance with the advice of Pope Urban that he'd been given, Galileo wrote his book in the form of a dialogue between fictional characters, each one defending different models of the solar system. Now, this fictional approach, and the fact that both sides were argued, would, presumably, Galileo thought, make the discussion a hypothetical one, just as the Pope had recommended. Not so, said Galileo's critics, many of whom thought that the arguments presented by the character Salviati, who was the one defending heliocentrism, were just a little bit too strong, clearly winning the argument and suggesting that this character's views were in fact the ones being advocated by the author. Whatever be the case, Galileo had written a powerful, if hypothetical and fictional, defense of the heliocentric model, which, surprise, surprise, didn't go down too well with the Church. Part 5. The Trial. Galileo's book angered his old friend, the Pope, who subsequently ordered a commission to investigate Galileo, resulting in him finally being put on trial in 1633. And this commission discovered something interesting as proof against Galileo. Remember, the charge against Galileo was this. Supposedly, according to the Church, he had been ordered way back in 1616 by Cardinal Bellarmine not to talk or write about heliocentrism in any way whatsoever. And here he was writing a book clearly contradicting that injunction. Now, in order to prove that Galileo had been explicitly told not to do this, that he had been ordered not to write about it, the prosecutors, the Pope's Commission, produced a copy of a letter that they discovered in the files of the Holy Office that Cardinal Bellarmine had apparently written to Galileo just after the two met, recounting what had been said at the meeting.
Uncompromising curiosity deserves uncompromising quality, crafted without compromise.
Don't settle for less.
Interesting. I'm curious what the letter has to say. Here we go.
Cardinal Bellarmine. Galileo was told, quote, henceforth not to hold, teach, or defend it, it being heliocentrism, in any way whatever, either orally or in writing, otherwise the Holy Office would start proceedings against him. This does seem pretty damning. Here is a copy of a letter written by Cardinal Bellarmine explicitly recounting that Galileo had been told not to teach about heliocentrism, quote, in any way whatever, and that if he did, he would be legally prosecuted. Clearly, Galileo broke this injunction by writing his dialogue, and so it seems that the Church was justified in punishing him, right? Well, buckle up. Here's where things get really interesting. In the most dramatic part of the entire trial, get this, Galileo produced his own version of the same letter. But not only that, Galileo's letter was the original letter, which the prosecution didn't know he had. Galileo's version of the letter was written in Bellarmine's own hand and signed by the cardinal, neither of which were true about the Church's version of the letter. In other words, the Holy Office presented a copy of a letter to condemn Galileo, but Galileo had the original, and the prosecutors didn't know this until he produced it during the trial.
That's pretty badass. In other words, mic drop. Wow, that's pretty sick.
But so what, right? The Church's letter was just a copy of the original, so who cares if Galileo was in possession of the first version? Well, mysteriously, one might even say suspiciously, Galileo's version of the letter doesn't say that Galileo was ordered not to talk or write about heliocentrism in any way whatever. Instead, it just tells him that heliocentrism is wrong and shouldn't be explicitly advocated. And since Galileo's book was a work of fictional dialogue, this would mean he never actually broke any of the Church's commands. Galileo's original letter was missing the crucial order upon which his entire trial was predicated. How very strange. I mean, okay, let me be clear here. Let me just briefly sum up this picture for you. The Church, in its inerrant and infinite wisdom, declares heliocentrism to be heretical. They visit Galileo and later put him on trial for breaking an order he was apparently given in 1616, but the letter they used to prove that he'd been given this order was only a copy, and Galileo produces the original letter, which, mysteriously, doesn't mention the order at all. Okay, so what are we to make of this? Why might the Church be in possession of a copy of a letter with a suspicious addition, not in the original, that just so happens to support their case against Galileo? Was this all just a big coincidental happy accident for the Church? Now, some scholars have rudely suggested that the Church faked their version of the letter in order to bring down Galileo, but I mean...
Definitely not. No, can't be. They didn't do that.
They'd surely never do something as evil and dishonest as that, would they? Well, I'll leave it to your own consideration, dear viewer, now that you know the facts. Part 6. The sentence. So, finally, a verdict was reached. The Church had their letter, Galileo had his, and since Galileo's was clearly the more trustworthy account, the Church admitted their mistake, let Galileo go free, and they all lived happily ever after, except of course they didn't. Don't be ridiculous. Instead, the Church gave precedence to their own version of the letter, found Galileo, quote, vehemently suspected of heresy, banned his book by public edict, and sentenced him to, quote, formal imprisonment in this holy office at our pleasure. Now, as it happens, this formal imprisonment ended up amounting to what we would today call house arrest. Galileo spent most of the remainder of his life in his Italian villa. So after the trial, Galileo didn't suffer in any prison cell. But his physical and intellectual freedom certainly suffered from the prison of religious dogmatism until the day he died. Galileo was forced to recant his heliocentric views and never wrote about them again. So Galileo was never tortured, nor was he put to death for his views, and the punishment he received was actually relatively mild. But now that you know the story of Galileo's trial, it's up to you to decide whether you think even a minimal punishment was justified at all. Remember, Galileo was charged with breaking an order that he may well have never actually received, and proof of which may have been forged by the Church. This is, of course, scandalous, but don't let it distract you from the fact that even if Galileo did actually receive that order, even if the Church wasn't lying or faking anything, the order was still an unjust one, and so his punishment would still have been unjust too. Remember, the order itself was to stop talking about heliocentrism, a scientific truth we now know to be undeniably accurate, simply because it contradicted Scripture. So even if the Church really did order Galileo in 1616 not to talk about it, they had no right to, and it only makes Galileo all the more brave for continuing to champion the scientific method despite the unimaginable risk. Conclusion. Now, for the sake of fairness, here's one potential argument in defense of the actions of the Church, which I actually see a lot of Catholic historians make. In Galileo's day, let's not forget, heliocentrism was far from established. Right? Galileo never actually proved that it was true, nor had anybody done so, not conclusively anyway. At the time, it was still a mere hypothesis. Not only this, but Cardinal Bellarmine himself actually once said that if unequivocal proof was presented to support heliocentrism, the Church would reinterpret the scriptures.
It's giving Thanksgiving all month long.
I mean, that's a fair point. You would, you don't really want to judge it based upon our modern understanding of heliocentrism, but you would want to base it on their kind of understanding at that time, their presentation of it at the time. And if the presentation isn't as to par as it is today, obviously, then why would you, do that? So I would say we have a very similar thing in modern day, which would be the theory of evolution. A lot of people reject evolution because of faith. And they'll bring up reasons as to why that's the case, but we have some pretty damning proof in favor of evolution, and we have to sort of reject some very trusted, long-time working concepts like carbon dating, DNA, in order to reject evolution. So I would say it's a similar issue, except in the case of evolution, the case was far stronger, whereas back then, I'm sure the case for heliocentrism wasn't as strong as it is today. So, but yeah, it's not something that only exists at that time. It's something that still exists to this very day.
If unequivocal proof was presented to support heliocentrism, the Church would reinterpret the scriptures. So it's not that Galileo was silenced because he was a threat, but because he couldn't actually prove what he was arguing. And so the Church wasn't anti-science, because heliocentrism wasn't science yet. Now, I could answer this objection by imploring you to go and just simply read the actual sentence administered by the Church to Galileo in 1633, a link to which is in the description. It's palpably clear that the Church wasn't just saying that Galileo's views hadn't been proven, but that they were false, and that this is why Galileo was condemned. Here, in the words of the Church itself, taken from its sentencing of Galileo, is my case in point. We say, pronounce, sentence, and declare that you, the above-mentioned Galileo, because of the things deduced in the trial and confessed by you as above, have rendered yourself, according to this holy office, vehemently suspected of heresy, namely, of having held and believed a doctrine which is false and contrary to the divine and holy Scripture, that the sun is the center of the world and does not move from east to west, and the earth moves and is not the center of the world, and that one may hold and defend as probable an opinion after it has been declared and defined contrary to Holy Scripture. Is there any doubt about...
In a sense, they're both wrong, though. Heliocentrism and geocentrism are both incorrect because, yes, the Earth revolves around the sun, but the sun is not stationary either. The sun revolves around the Milky Way. It goes in a revolution around the black hole at the center of the Milky Way. So technically, everything revolves around the super black hole at the center of our galaxy. And who knows? Maybe the galaxies all surround something else. I'm not an expert in astrophysics, but technically, in a sense, they're both incorrect. Yes, the Earth revolves around the sun, but that's not the end of the story. The sun revolves around the super black hole. But they didn't know that at the time.
About what this trial was really about. But despite this, let's just grant for a minute that the trial really was about Galileo's method and decorum rather than his actual beliefs. Here's where we need to remember something crucially important about what science actually is. Science, it pays to remind ourselves, is not a thing as such, but a method. Right? It's a way of understanding the world, not a list of facts or truths. Science is a method characterized by open inquiry, the ability and willingness to question established beliefs about the universe and to hypothesize about potential alternative explanations.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think too often we look at science and we kind of say science is a fact producer. It produces facts and it produces truth, ultimate truth. No, it like you said, it's a methodology. It's a way of understanding how the external world functions. Now, the data we receive is going to be imperfect, meaning that it's not going to represent every possible scenario, right? It's going to represent all the scenarios we have conducted the data within. And so the experiments in. So the data is going to be true in the sense, but our conclusions from the data may not be accurate. It may not be truthful. No matter how seemingly clear the connection might be from the data to the conclusion, there's still factors that might be involved that we are not recognizing or not accounting for in our experiments. And so future understanding of future data is going to kind of lead us to new assumptions, new understandings of the world. I think Bernardo Kasparov, he uses the word helpful fiction or something along those lines, I think is what he says. So that's what it is, useful fiction. So science leads us to making conclusions that are useful fictions. They're not ultimately true because there's always factors and things that are assumed, right? That are our sensory or our interpretation of things, our five senses are all correct. We assume that to be true in order for us to conduct science, but theoretically they could be false. They could be inaccurate. They could be leading us astray in certain senses. And so that's why we would say that, for instance, the theory of gravity as given to us by Isaac Newton, discussing gravity in the sense of it's a force that pulls on different things based on mass. That's actually technically false, but it's useful. It works whenever we use the calculation and think of it in that way. Our understanding of the world fits that when we observe it. But when we look at what actually is gravity in a more deeper sense, we realize it's actually the bending of space-time. And even that might be a useful fiction that we might disprove in the future with new data and new information. So yes, it works, and yes, we can use it to make predictions about the world around us, but does that mean that it's ultimately true? No, it just means that it's the most useful fiction that we have based upon the data and everything around us. So yeah, science is a method of trying to understand the world around us. It's not a producer of ultimate truth or anything like that. Same thing with religion. It's the same thing. We're trying to find a useful fiction that works, that helps describe the world around us. And when it doesn't fit, well, we just change our understanding of the faith or the religion. We kind of fit that to it. That was Galileo's understanding, not the Catholic Church's understanding.
And so even if Galileo couldn't conclusively prove the heliocentric model that he advocated, the process of discussion and debate that books like his dialogue represented define and are absolutely crucial to the scientific method. It's this, the challenge, the inquiry, the questioning, that the Church attempted to silence in Galileo. This is why the accusation that the Church was in conflict with science is a justified one. Not because they tried to silence a fact, but because they tried to prevent the honest method of obtaining facts, fearing that they would contradict Scripture. Not because the Church held to the wrong view, but because they did so dogmatically, without allowing any challenges. This is why Galileo is called the father of the scientific method, because he realized that despite what any divinely inspired authorities might tell us, the essence of truth lies in trusting what we prove and observe, not what we're told.
Very poetic at the end. I love that.
I've been Alex O'Connor, or Cosmic Skeptic. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon to allow me to continue making videos and to vote on what kind of content you'd like to see from me in the future. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, as well as leaving a like and a comment. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I think often, because Alex is very kind of anti-religion early on. He's not so much anymore. So one thing that kind of makes me sad, I think, from these live streams is the fact that we watch these videos, and I agree with a lot of what Alex has to say, but it also comes with the notion that, you know, or this undertone that religion is bad or wrong or what have you. And yet I'm not against religion at all. I think it actually brings a lot of usefulness, brings a lot of utility to people's lives. And so that's kind of something that gets missed, I think, a lot of the time in these live streams. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because with Galileo, I really love his approach. You know, he's like, look, let's observe the world. Let's use the scientific method. Let's try to understand the world around us. And let's also recognize the value of ancient scriptures and what ancient people have passed down to us. And let's just reinterpret what they said based upon our modern day interpretations and sort of combine the two. We don't have to have them be opposing each other. Religion and science don't have to oppose each other. They can work together and they can be a beautiful thing, like tradition, truth and tradition. That's kind of the point of this channel, is to highlight that traditions are not to be thrown away or burned or thrown into the trash, but they are to be cultivated and valued. And they are to be something where you, as someone who maybe is deconstructing or trying to understand the tradition and the faith that you hold to understand that as something that brings you value, something that brings you use in your life, brings you meaning. What are the things that you hold to in your faith? What are the things that you maybe don't hold to anymore? And trying to understand all of that based upon your experiences, based upon science, based upon truth seeking, understanding all of that in the light of some sort of useful fiction, some sort of useful religion or faith. And the religion or faith doesn't have to be fictional in that sense, but fictional in the sense of it being an axiom that is helpful for you, something that you just believe to be true without having to maybe fully back it up with a lot of, you know, truth. So I think that science and religion can really work together. And the notion that they have to fight against each other is a notion that's a non-starter. It's a non-sequitur. So, yeah, really appreciate that. And yet it moves. That's how he ends it all. Well, we will do our comment here. That's going to be 139 videos. Good job. And 29 together. So we've watched 29 through the live streams. Almost 30 videos. Next week, it'll be 30. Let's go. Let's go. All right. Let's add our comment. Okay. I said, I think Galileo's approach is great. He didn't throw out religion and call it useless. Instead, he saw science as a method of understanding the world around him, and religion as a similar, more ancient way of doing the same thing. It's not that science and religion must be at odds, but that through valuing and cultivating both, we can increase value in our own lives. People who are religious and are not should not be anti-science, and people who are pro-scientific method should not be anti-religious. They can coexist, and that's what I think I learned from Galileo. Great stuff. Boom. Comment added. All right. Well, that's going to end us for tonight. That's going to be the live stream. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pretty interesting discussion. Are humans more valuable than trees? I would say so, yes. But I think we also should value trees. Trees are beautiful. We could not exist without trees. They give us the oxygen that we need in order to survive. So comment below, as I said before, what is your favorite tree? Let me know. Tell me why. And also, if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe, like the video, do all that good stuff, and come back next week. You know, we're doing this every single week, every Thursday, 7:30 Central Standard Time. And if you enjoyed this episode, well, you can do the same thing next week. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you had a bingo too, let me know. We did not get a bingo this week. I sadly, again, did not get a bingo. We're so close. This week I had, let me view it real quick. This week we got two of them. So yeah, not as good as last week. Last week we had 4. It was so close. But anyway, if you have a bingo, let me know in the comments below and I will shout you out in the next video. So anyway, that will end us for tonight. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and I will see you